So it's, give me 1 second. It's 1:38. We'll go ahead and get started. I guess I have something I need to read that I know is read at the beginning of each meeting. So I think we do that before roll. So let me just read that before we get started. And that is that before we begin, I want to remind the Public Safety Finance Strategic Support Committee members and members of the public to please follow our code of conduct at meetings. This includes commenting on specific agenda item only and addressing the full body. Public speakers will not engage in conversation with the mayor, the chair, council members, board members, commission, or staff. All members of the Public Safety Finance Strategic Support Committee, staff, and the public are expected to refrain from abusive language. Repeated failure to comply with the code of conduct, which will disturb, disrupt, or impede the orderly conduct of the meeting, may result in removal from the meeting. This meeting of the Public Safety, Finance, and Strategic Support Committee will now come to order. Can the clerk secretary please take a roll?
Arenas?
Here.
Mahan?
Here.
Jimenez?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, our first item on the agenda is the consent calendar. It's the bi-monthly financial report. I'm not sure if anyone's interested in pulling it for consent, but if not, I'll just entertain a motion to move forward, to move it.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Chair, I believe we need to have public comment on
Public
this.
comment. I apologize. Thank you for the reminder. We'll go to public comment before we vote. Go ahead.
Blair Beekman.
Beekman here. Thanks for the meeting today. I'm trying out a new headphone set and microphone because my headset microphone kind of shorted out on me this week. Sorry about that.
Okay.
For this item, I just wanted to quickly comment on as you know, these are March, April budget items, I think, and as we've gone over the budget recently, real good luck to yourselves how we can make real clear to the public and all of ourselves what our budget practices will be like into 2023. I think by this fall, you know, we can start to have a better list of exactly how budgets and memorandums, how that whole process will be presented at council meetings. And I'm looking forward to that. I know we're at a time of war and inflation questions. Those inflation questions, I think we want to tackle at this time. I think we're ready to take it on and really address, you know, how we can curb and limit the future of inflation. Good luck how we can do that, because we used to be able to do that all the time before COVID-19 when we were pretty good at it and it was fun to do. So it'll be good to see that coming back and talking in those good terms, how to limit inflation in the fall and for reports in 2023, about time in the fall. It'll be in time. And, thank you. I'll be preparing for that. And just a reminder, we can do that sort of good work coming up soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman. Is there anyone else from the public?
Back to the committee.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So I think there was a motion and a second, so we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote on the consent item.
Arenas?
Yes.
Mahan?
Aye.
Jimenez?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is item reports to committee. Item 1, the Police Department Operation and Performance Bi-Monthly Status Report. I know we have PowerPoint presentation. We also have Lieutenant Donahue and Lieutenant Prescott. So take it away, sir.
Thank you, sir. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Lieutenant Steve Donahue. I am the Commander of Research and Development of the San Jose Police Department. And today I'll be presenting the department's Operation and Performance Bi-Monthly Status Report. Today we will be covering, let me get this slideshow moving here. There we go. Today we'll be covering citywide crime statistics. Then I'll be presenting on other matters of interest, including the gender-based violence response and strategy work plan update, and a brief update on redistricting efforts. And then finally, Lieutenant Leo Prescott will be providing an update on sideshow enforcement. We will begin with our citywide Part 1 UCR crime stats for the first 4 months of this year. As you can see, UCR defined rapes are up almost 48% when comparing between 2021 and 2022. Now you may remember this number was 68% in my last bi-monthly update. And this is, as a reminder, because small changes to small number sets result in large percentage differences. And as we move through the year, we're expecting this comparison ratio to continue to reduce. The other numbers on this table are all within normal limits. Now, I'd like to take a moment to remind you about our impending switch to the National Incident-Based Reporting System, or NIBRS. NIBRS captures data on each single crime incident, as well as on separate offenses within the same incident. So they also include information on victims, known offenders, relationships between victims and offenders, arrestees, and property crimes. So we're expecting to switch to NIBRS soon after July 1st. I don't know the exact date, but we will get that to you in an informational memo with additional information on what this is going to mean. But you're going to see different stats as we move forward with that switch to NIBRS. And now I will move on to our gender-based violence response and strategy work plan update. Similar to my last bi-monthly, we're seeing an increase over 50% in UCR-defined rape offenses when comparing the first 4 months of this year to the last 4 years. So we took a dive into those numbers, and here's what we found. There's really two main issues at play. The first is we're continuing to have an unusually high number of cases that we turn over to other agencies because they occurred outside our jurisdiction. And the other is that we are seeing a lot of historical reporting over 2 years old, so pre-COVID lockdown. Now, we don't know why that is. It's just an anomaly that's happening right now. It doesn't indicate an increase of rape incidents within our city and within this time period. These are historical and they are outside our jurisdiction. So we're watching the increase, and I expect to have more information on this for you at our next bi-monthly. I've asked SAIU to take a deeper dive into those numbers and try to figure out why are we seeing all these outside the city and historical cases coming forward right now. Outside of that, the rape numbers, we are seeing the rest of these numbers within the normal limits for this reporting period and the first half of the year. These charts show the current status of both the city and countywide work items since the inception of the gender-based violence response and strategy work plan, and there are no changes to these charts since my last report. This table shows the San Jose work items. Again, there are no changes to this table since my last report. And this table shows the countywide work items. Again, no changes since my last report. And this last one is the graphic that shows the status of the Sexual Assault Bill of Rights. Now, for a long time, we've had this one thing left, this in progress for resource cards. What happened was that a card was developed, it was prepared, and then an error was discovered in the card. It needed to be reprinted. This is done by the county. It's outside our purview of effect, and there's nothing we can do about it. The county is waiting for the cards to finish being printed, and then they'll be distributed. As soon as we get them, they'll be out on the streets, but that's what we're waiting on. There were 45 qualified adult safe exams and 14 qualified juvenile safe exams during the reporting period. And of those 59 qualified exams, we saw 29 individuals move forward with the exam. Now, as you can see, there are big gaps between qualified and not qualified. And we looked at these numbers as well. So what we found was two things. One, the historical reports that we're seeing a lot of created an environment where the not qualification was because it was historical. And the other part is that these are incidents without penetration, or they were over the clothing, or there was no elements of sexual assault. So this leads me to a very exciting announcement, and I'm very happy to be able to say this. So on June 9th, last week, we disseminated a training bulletin department-wide removing the option of qualifying safe exams. So through a collaboration between the city and the county, every individual, whether adult or juvenile, is going to be provided a safe exam regardless of when the assault occurred. So in addition, sexual assault nurses will no longer need to obtain law enforcement approval prior to performing the exams. So this means there will be no longer a delay waiting for law enforcement approval when a survivor arrives at the hospital asking for an exam and the commencement of that exam. We're very happy we could get this level of survivor-centric approach across the line. and we're looking forward to how this will benefit survivors in the long run. Now, based on this new development, and with the permission of this committee, we will no longer need to report back on qualified versus non-qualified SAFE exams because all exams will be qualified. So if you're okay with it, I would like to remove this slide from the deck for the next bi-monthly presentation. And now we will move on to redistricting. So we are still in phase one. The RFP is closed and we're currently in the evaluation phase. We're expected to complete the evaluation phase in August, which bumped out the subsequent implementation dates 2 months. And I've changed those on this slide so you can see them. We will have additional information for this committee at the next bi-monthly update after the completion of the evaluation process. Now, right now, as we've done in the last few presentations, I'm going to pause if there are any questions or comments from the committee. And if they're not, I will continue and pass it on to Lieutenant Prescott, who will be presenting on sideshow enforcement.
I think, yeah, let's just entertain the questions now. I think Councilmember Arenas has her hand raised. Go ahead, Councilmember Arenas.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm really excited about this new update, and I want to thank you for all the work that's gone behind closed doors to get to this point where they're all survivors will be able to receive a SAFE exam regardless of when they are reporting and how that transpired. And so I've got to just really commend all of you. Chief Mata, thank you for keeping the lines of communication open with our partners and listening to our partners and acknowledging what the needs are of our survivors. And so I really want to thank you and thank you, Lieutenant Donahue, for supporting this, as well as she's not here, but I know Lee had a lot also. Everybody had a little bit of a role to play here. And so when policies like this change, and I forgot to really mention this on the dais on Tuesday, but this is one of the greatest, I think, accomplishments that our survivors can receive this year from us in terms of making sure that our processes work for them and not for ourselves and not for our bureaucracy. And so I've just got a really huge round of applause. Chair, I'm sorry that I'm going on about this, but I think that this is just a tremendous accomplishment on their part. This is what our group has been wanting to do for a really long time, and we're finally there. And so this is just absolutely wonderful. And there isn't a question about funding. We don't have to think about those things. We're just thinking about truly a survivor and trauma-centered approach and interaction. And so thank you so much, Lee, for working on this. I know Jennifer has worked on this as well. And I'm just absolutely over the moon with this. So thank you so much. I do have a question, and I know that you all have been very attentive and diligent about supporting the family that has had this huge loss of their parents over in the north side of San Jose. I also saw, I think, something, an intimate partner violence situation over in Campbell, even though that's outside of our jurisdiction. It's still local. I want to know what, if anything, can we begin to do in terms of campaign or engagement with our families in order to motivate our children to share with a close adult, a trusted adult, about some of what they're experiencing, so that they can not necessarily be removed from this situation, but so that the family can receive that support services before we get to a tragedy. What is it that we are hoping to do in these next couple of months while we wait for school to start back up again.
Well, thank you, council member. That's the question is, it's a difficult one to answer because we are out of schools right now, right?
Mhm.
Kids are out for the summer. And I know our crime prevention unit spends a lot of time in the schools and works very hard to establish those lines of communication and ensure that the children and survivors of domestic violence, child abuse, and sexual assault all have the resources that they need to be able and the comfortability to be able to report. During the summer, we do see reports come through other entities, through day camps or family members coming forward during the summer. So it's not like they're stopped during the summer. I think right now we are going to continue that campaign of providing the services to the survivors as they come forward, working with our community-based organizations like the YWCA and Next Door Solutions to ensure that advocates are provided. We're going to continue to be out there with patrol and talking to kids, and you'll see a lot more community events this summer as we're ramping up. We have for example, a coffee with the cop coming up this weekend where we're expecting a couple hundred people to come out. And so things like that, you're going to find that we are out there in the community doing what we can to ensure those lines of communication stay open.
Yeah. One of the things that we've shifted over in PRNS is to have more place-based locations that are free for our community to take advantage of. For example, a lot of the San Jose camps where there's a lower income neighborhood, we are going to provide free classes essentially, and that's the new road that we're paving in order to be in the places where we really are needed versus where people can afford us or afford the classes. And one of the things that I'm thinking is that it would be wonderful to see some level of partnership. And Lee, this is something that I think needs to get worked out maybe with PRNS and our crime prevention unit chief, that there could be visits to some of these classes where we know we are targeting a certain zip code, where we're targeting certain communities, and that we know that these kiddos are basically a captive audience for us in order to engage them in trust building or just awareness of not necessarily of consent, but of safe touch and that kind of conversation. Is that something that we've ever done in the past, or that we can potentially look at begin doing?
Thank you, Councilmember. Yes, we've done that with, like you said, the safe touch and relationships, right, in our youth. So it's just something we can definitely partner with our stakeholders to see what type of programming they already have, so we can partner with them. And you're absolutely right. This is an opportunity for us to not only during the summertime, right, with these events, but moving into the school year, is to provide that education to our youth, not only in having healthy relationships, but also in what they see at home in regards to domestic violence, and how to process that and maybe report it as well. So this is an opportunity for us as well to conduct outreach with our advocates in partnership with them.
Did you want to add anything, Lee? Sorry, I saw you leaning in. Wasn't sure.
I was captivated by the chief's comments. I'm sorry.
He is very captivating. Let me tell you, he's speaking my language with a lot of these wonderful changes that I'm seeing and movement to support our survivors of intimate partner violence and sexual assault. I'd love for us to have a conversation offline on how to really make that happen this summer, if that's something that's possible. I know that we've seen this increment of sexual assault, whether it's in intimate partner violence or for our young children, And this is an opportunity for us to be able to connect to our children in a safe and playful environment. And I really would love for us to take advantage of that and bring in our crime prevention specialists. And I'm really looking forward to when our council finally approves for certain those advocates and those analysts, because I think that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of where some of these crimes are happening and the age ranges and the overcrowding that is impacting our communities, that's creating maybe this perfect storm and opportunity for perpetrators to continue to do what they're doing. So those were some of the questions that I had. The last one that I have is about the status report, and help me understand the presentation on page 6, I think it is 6, has the UCR defined rape offenses and has a breakdown of all of them. So these are UCR defined rape offenses. Obviously, these are not sexual molestations that are transpiring mostly with our children. Where is that information?
So these are the offenses that are included under the title rape for reporting to the Uniform Crime Report. So we report out bi-monthly on just what we report to UCR. The crime of 288 of the Penal Code is child molest. That is not one of the rape offenses. If that child molest were a rape, it would show up in here.
Yeah, I thought that this is one of the changes that I had asked early on, Lee, so that we can keep track of what was happening with our children out there, since they're the largest number of survivors versus intimate partner violence, or maybe this is not intimate partner violence, but these are strangers maybe attacking some of the survivors here in this particular slideshow. When is it only in the annual that you bring it back up?
So annually, we report out on all the types of events that sexual assault investigations reviews. Everything. We talk about human trafficking. We talk about child molest. She reports on that annually. We don't gather them quarterly like this, or even bi-monthly is more frequent. The data is gathered and then conglomerated for that annual report out in the spring.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'd like to see is for us to have a baseline and in anticipation of some of these analysts that are coming in, that we hopefully have on a quarterly basis these kinds of reports, so that we can see not in a year looking back, which I feel is almost not too late, but depending on how the school year is framed within that incident, it may be too late. The kids are in, summer school. It's time. There's too much time that's gone by. We're consistently looking back, and I know that this is not a kind of crime that we can interrupt. We certainly can prepare our children to be their own advocates and share with an adult. But I'd like to have a closer look on some of these children impacted crimes, so that we can see where they're at, and if the perpetrator happens to be the same in many of the different cases. That's one of the things that I don't know that we have been able to gather, is to see who those perpetrators. We know who those perpetrators are, but we don't know if they're repeat offenders, and where those children are in terms of repeat offenses. anyways, I'd like for us to begin to think about how we're going to monitor some of this information so that it makes sense to us and it's creating a picture in terms of trends and patterns for our children as best as we can, so that we can then figure out what are the best strategies to use to address those patterns and those trends. Does that
Do
make
you mind
sense?
if I need some clarification on a couple of things, if you don't mind. So the first one is you asked about child impacted crimes. So for children impacted crimes, all the things you see on the screen now do include juvenile um,
Mhm.
incidents. So we don't differentiate when we report to uniform crime reports. So it's both children and adult. Are you asking for this to be further broken down into
No,
juvenile?
not necessarily. I mean, we can take a look at that breakdown. That would be interesting to see. I think we've done it in the past, and we've seen that the greatest number of survivors are not necessarily in intimate partner relationships.
Right.
When we see the overall numbers. But what I'm asking for is for us to include some of the sexual assaults, some of the lewd, and I forget exactly what the title is for that particular crime. But I think you mentioned it as a 288.
Yeah, so we can absolutely do that. I think it's a staffing issue right now. As you know, we have one analyst that does all
Right,
of sexual assaults,
right,
and it's challenging for her to gather up all the stats that I
right,
need for this already. I'm
right.
I'm hesitant to ask her to do more without until we get
Lieutenant,
more.
I'm saying this in anticipation of our council saying yes to our future analyst. Yes,
Yeah, so if I could jump in, I think what the council members saying is, we're not adding those resources in this budget. It was direction, as we look forward to putting together next year's budget for 22, 23, those additional resources. But this year, spending a little bit of time looking at some of these and breaking them out where appropriate, so we do have a little bit of a baseline. So
yes,
those additional resources come online, A, you as the council can see if, where you're putting the money is making a difference, quite frankly, which I think is really important for you guys and for us to have that data. But then also with those additional resources, we can really have additional personnel that can break down the data, see what trends are surfacing and what insights those derive for the chief and Lieutenant Donahue and all those involved to go ahead and make operational decisions or policy decisions for you, council member.
yes. So let's see if we can get as much as we can in terms of a baseline now, if that's possible, and in anticipation of these analysts that I'm just super excited to hopefully we knock on wood, salt over my shoulder, fingers crossed that everything goes well, and that we will be able to have access to this resource. More importantly, the information that will help us determine how to best address some of these patterns and what these patterns and trends are really telling us. So anyways, that is in anticipation. I didn't mean to stress you out, Lieutenant Donahue, because I know that you all have been getting all of this information as best as you can with what you have in terms of resources, and I really appreciate it. I also really appreciate what our police department has done, Chief, in response to the 6 children who are now left in this world, to be cared for by other relatives other than their parents, because of intimate partner violence, which is absolutely just tragic. But we know that there's a lot of situations that lead up to this, and it doesn't have to come to this end. Anyways, I really appreciate all of the work that you've all done, and where we are. I'm just absolutely really proud of all of the work that you've all done, and where we're at right now and the work we're about to complete. once we get additional resources. So thank you. Oh, and motion to approve.
Well,
Second. Oh, actually, we have more of the report.
yeah, we're not even done with the presentation yet. So can we put that motion on hold, and we'll go to Councilmember Mahan, because I think he had his hand raised. And just after Councilmember Mahan's comments, assuming there's no other comments, we'll move on to the second part of the presentation, and then we'll go to public comment. But after that, we can, after the second part of the presentation, we can get a motion to approve. Go ahead, Councilmember Mahan.
Perfect. Thanks, Chair. Appreciate it. And I'll be super quick. I just wanted to add my thanks to staff for all the work that has gone into reducing barriers to safe exams. And I thought we'd be remiss in not noting the tireless advocacy of Councilmember Arenas, who was so kind to thank everyone, but didn't say anything about her own advocacy and leadership on this for a very long time. So I just thought that should be noted. And that's all I had, Chair.
Thank you. Ditto those comments. We see her in action every Tuesday and every month here on PSFSS. So we certainly thank you for all your efforts, Councilmember Arenas. With that being said, let's move on to the second part of our presentation. Take it away.
All right. I am going to share my screen here for Lieutenant Prescott. Now, before we move on, are you guys okay with us not doing the safe exam qualified versus not qualified moving forward, right? Because they're all going to be qualified.
It would be great to just see, oh, sorry, Chair, is that okay?
No, go ahead, Councilmember Arenas.
It would be wonderful to see maybe on an annual basis, just looking back to see what that looks like, and just to ensure that, you know, everything's on track. I think if we talk about it more on the meetings that we have with the county, I think that would probably be beneficial, just so that we can iron out any kinks in the system. But I'm
Okay.
fine with that. Let's just keep that maybe on an annual and see how that goes.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll make sure we do it in the annual presentation in the spring, and then Lieutenant Tran can talk about it with the county as they go through this process. Thank you. All right, and now I'll be introducing Lieutenant Leo Prescott, who will be providing a sideshow enforcement update.
Afternoon, council members. I'm Lieutenant Prescott. I'll be providing a brief update on sideshow racer enforcement on behalf of Captain Trayer. Our first slide here shows a comparison of last fiscal year to this fiscal year of calls for service or complaints that we received at the police department regarding sideshow or racer issues that are occurring. We've broken it down by month with the light blue bar graph being last fiscal year, the dark blue being this fiscal year. As you can see, each month has seen a pretty dramatic reduce in our call volume or complaints that we've received regarding sideshows and racer enforcement for every month except for the month of August, which has seen a small decrease. Last fiscal year, we received 1,922 calls for service or complaints about racer and sideshow activity. And this year, with the remainder of June still to go, we received a little bit over 950 complaints. Over the course of the fiscal year, that's a reduction of approximately half of the number of overall complaints that we've received from citizens regarding sideshow activity. You can also see the month breakdown that we have, which shows that during the summer months, typically June through October or November, we do see a pretty significant increase over those months compared to the other months for sideshow activity. Next slide, please. This slide compares last fiscal year to this fiscal year for incidents that we've seen, multiple incidents within a particular intersection, and it lists those intersections. We used keyword searches on all of our events, those keywords being either sideshow or racer or donuts, in order to come up with each of these. Compared to the last slide, which was overall calls for service or call volume that we've had, these are actual incidents that have occurred in those intersections. Obviously, you can have multiple callers complaining about one single incident or event. As we can see, a lot of these intersections are intersections that we've historically had sideshow incidents at. And it's really no surprise to us that that continues to have a high volume in those particular intersections. There are some intersections that are newer to us that haven't seen the increase in the amount of sideshow activity that's happened there, as well as the activity that has been occurring within the sideshows themselves. We've seen an increase in situations which can cause danger to the public as well as to our officers. We've had an increase in seizures of firearms from enforcement stops that are related to sideshows. We've seen growing number of people at the sideshows, industrial fireworks being used, and it's an increased danger to our officers as well, from things such as laser strikes to our helicopter and our officers on the ground, to officers being injured while attempting to conduct enforcement at these sideshows as the vehicles are attempting to flee in a hazardous manner. Sorry about that. I believe that this shows that this sideshow activity is a dangerous situation for the citizens of San Jose and for our officers. And it's not just a few kids out spinning a couple donuts and then moving on. And it's not just something along the lines of a car club or a car show. Next slide, please. So why the reduction? So 2 slides ago, we showed that there was a reduction of approximately 50% in our call volume of complaints that we received. The number one, or one of those reasons for that reduction is efforts from City Council and City Council support. And I want to thank you personally for those efforts. One of those being the enacting of various municipal codes, giving us the laws necessary to enforce, such as promoter ordinance and spectator ordinance. Also through your public support of the police department, as well as condemning of the sideshows, so that it can help educate the public of the dangers that are involved, as well as, of course, the funding that has been provided for our officers to be able to help combat the sideshow or racer activity. Also, the city attorney's office and the support that we've received from the city attorney's office since the enactment of the promoter ordinance, the city attorney, both with the promoter ordinance and with the spectator ordinance, but especially with the promoter ordinance, the city attorney has done an excellent job on prosecuting these crimes. In particular, one of our major promoters of sideshows has seen a dramatic decrease in promotions here in San Jose since the city attorney has started prosecution against that person. Also, the Department of Transportation has enacted or engineered several intersections to promote both pedestrian and vehicular safety, as well as making those intersections less desirable for participants of sideshows to conduct those sideshows in those heavily occurring intersections for sideshows. Our enforcement as well, we've seen a good increase in our enforcement. Initially, when the racer issue started, we would get enough officers essentially to disperse the crowd, and not a significant amount of enforcement initially was occurring. Lately, we've really changed our model on that and worked on getting as much enforcement out of these as we can in order to send a message, citations, arrests, and impounding of vehicles. We've also really amped up on our social media, and I believe that's had an effect as well. Advertising to the public over our social media accounts, those enforcement efforts that we've taken, both to educate the public on actions that we've taken as a police department, as well as being able to show the consequences to those who are involved in and spectating those sideshows. Next slide, please. So where can we do better? What can we do more? Or maybe more appropriately, what can we continue to do to continue to see a successful decrease in the call volume that we've seen. Number one is to continue our work with the Department of Transportation on creative infrastructure solutions that can deter sideshows at those heavily impacted intersections. As we move forward and Department of Transportation continues to engineer additional intersections, they're also engineering intersections in different ways to determine which engineering efforts have the greatest effect in deterring that activity. And of course, that will take time for us to make that determination. Also with social media, continued efforts with our social media, maybe doubling down on our social media. An idea that we've had potentially was when we write seizure warrants for vehicles that are involved, and we try to locate those vehicles and impound those vehicles at a later time, potentially bringing our own photo person with us, photographer with us, or videographer with us in order to take multiple photos and videos of these vehicles being impounded. A lot of these vehicles are highlighted on the racers' own accounts. And so if on our social media, we can show that we are impounding multiple vehicles that are involved in these activities, then that might be able to also send a message. Also, where we can work better, or what we are working on right now, is a collaborative effort between the city attorney's office and the district attorney's office. Municipal codes, as you know, are prosecuted by the city attorney's office, and as a result, the district attorney's office traditionally has not had as much of an involvement with prosecution of these crimes. However, we have had meetings with all three entities, the police, DA's office, and city attorney's office, in order to come up with ways that we can get the district attorney's office involved and additional crimes that the district attorney's office would prosecute, that we might be able to enforce on the streets. Another way is task force style operations. As I'm sure everyone realizes, this is not a San Jose specific problem. This is a Bay Area and beyond problem, honestly. But if we could take resources and we could combine our resources with other agencies with collaborative efforts, either Bay Area wide or county-wide, in order to help this enforcement and combat this problem. Often these sideshows will either start in Santa Clara, then move to San Jose, and then maybe move till Milpitas, and then come back to San Jose. And as a result, when we conduct our enforcement, we typically have, we hit that city barrier of our city boundaries, and then that we no longer are enforcing. So with a collaborative task force style operations, we might be able to help combat that. And of course, last, with continued overtime funding. So with the funds that were provided for our racer enforcement detail, not only does that allow our officers to work additional overtime, so we have additional resources when these sideshows are occurring, but prior to the sideshows, we have specially trained officers on our racer enforcement detail who can recognize vehicles that have modifications that are illegal. And with those modifications, they make a vehicle stop, and they're able to issue a citation for a state inspection that needs to occur. And the corrections to these modifications can be very costly to the owner of the vehicle. As a result, we have seen racers post on their social media to stay out of San Jose, because we are enforcing this significantly prior to the sideshows even starting. Next slide, please. And with that, that concludes my part of the presentation for racer enforcement detail. Do we have any questions?
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Prescott. I do have a few questions, but well, let me just ask them and then we'll go to the public comment. But the first question I have is, if you go back to one of your slides, I think where it showed the different breakdown of the keywords where you all were searching for the different locations, how much trouble would it be to add the districts in there? I noticed some of the streets, obviously Monterey and Branham and Snell, some of those I know off the top of my head that they're in my district, as an example. but some others I don't, and I don't, I suspect no one on the council knows every single street in their respective district. Would it be a lot of trouble to do that, or how much
So-
effort does that take?
For that, I'm actually going to have to defer to Lieutenant Donahue in R&D because our analysts would be the ones to continue that breakdown, and he has more knowledge about that than I do.
And given Lieutenant Donahue's comments on some other requests as it relates to data, I suppose this may fall in the same bucket. So I would just say, if at all possible, I think it'd be helpful. So do with it what you will, but I think that would be helpful for me to see, and I suspect maybe other council members to see.
Councilmember Jimenez, that is not a problem. Do you want it by council district or by police district?
I think about it more as council district, but
No
you know,
problem.
that whatever, I mean, if other folks have other thoughts, feel free to, take those into consideration and whenever you present this again, bring it back with a little bit more information. If it's not too much trouble, that'd be great.
Yeah, that one's no problem at all.
Okay, cool. The other question I had is related to the deployment of the overtime resources. And so what I'm wondering is, I think there was a previous slide that showed that there's an uptick of some of this behavior during certain months and such. I imagine probably certain times of day, things of that nature. So can you talk a little bit about how you all are deciding when to deploy the overtime resources to really combat some of this? How you make those decisions?
Sure. Obviously, we want to be able to deploy during the highest, period of time where these are occurring the most, which of course for us would be essentially 11 o'clock p.m., 2300 to around 0300 or 3 a.m. in the morning. Unfortunately, when we're talking about overtime, there are other factors that are considered. And the number one factor, honestly, is getting our officers to be willing to do the overtime. Because of our staffing that we do have with the police department right now, there are overtime opportunities for our officers, and a lot of overtime opportunities for our officers. And this is just discretionary overtime for them. This is not something that we can order them to do this type of overtime. So they're doing it on a voluntary basis. And as a result, if we create a model where we're only allowing for those particular hours, honestly, because of when our actual shifts fall, it's very unlikely that we would get officers that would do that overtime. We do offer it. Don't get me wrong. We offer it. We don't get officers that volunteer for those particular hours. So we have opened that up, realizing that even prior to, if we can get enforcement to occur from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. prior to when we normally see the side shifts start, if we can still have those officers out there issuing those citations for the inspections on the type of vehicle that would likely be involved in a sideshow, then that can have an impact as well. So to answer your question, there are several factors that are involved. Obviously, we do know those times that both of the month, of the day, of the day of the week, of the hours that we have. We know when those resources are needed the most. We do request officers to work during those times, and we do get some response. However, we also offer those during other times where we know that will still have an impact. Of course, when we're talking about the months, we do offer more when we see those heavier months, June to October.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. I mean, I can ask a lot of other questions related to that, but I'll leave it at that. I guess one of my biggest concerns, and the main reason I ask, is I'm wondering if sometimes the deployment is not sort of matching when the need is highest, right? And to your point,
Sure.
I don't think, trying to get folks to volunteer for those times, right? Working at 3 a.m. probably isn't the most appealing time for someone to come and work overtime, which I understand, right? But, and I appreciate you stating that having them work, say, 6 to 10 still has an impact in that they're still citing folks for some of those modifications, right? That then feed into some of the behavior later. So I see that there's value there. I just worry that I guess I don't want to get to a point where we're funding overtime just to fund it and it's not being impactful, right? And so, and I understand in your perspective, I think it seems that way, which is a good thing. And so that's really where my question came from, is just thinking about, and you all are doing the thinking, so I appreciate it. The other question I had is around the task force. I know, for example, we have I think it's referred to as RADIF, the Regional Auto Theft Task Force and such. Where is that currently? Because it seems to me to be a logical approach to this, right? Given that it's happening regionally in the county and things of that nature. So the two questions I have is, what are we currently doing as it relates to task force on this particular issue? And if it's not up and running, I'm curious as to what it takes to get a task force related specifically to this type of issue up and running.
Yeah. So overall, it does take time to be able to initiate a task force, because we're talking about multiple agencies, we're talking about multiple cities, and being able to get those resources, agreements on what resources each city would be willing to give, as well as within our own city, with the limited resources that we also have within our own, within the police department, being able to come up with those resources. So where exactly we are on that, I mean, there's discussion with the other agencies, but beyond that, I'm not really sure where we are on exactly being able to begin and when that might begin having a task force.
And Chief, thank you for unmuting, because I was hoping that you would.
Yes, no, I'll chime in. I know a task force was discussed almost 2 years ago amongst the Santa Clara County chiefs. And as Lieutenant Prescott had mentioned, when we form a task force, or when a task force is formed, there has to be some type of funding. In the case of a RADIF, there's state monies, right, that which is the Regional Auto Theft Task Force. They're the ones that just focus on vehicle theft. So there's state funding that goes into a host agency, which we're part of. We're not the host agency, but we're part of the RADIF. So RADIF is primarily in our city, just given the number of vehicle thefts that occur here in San Jose. So that task force is up and running. They don't focus on any sideshows. However, if the county chiefs decide that they want to form a task force, we have to discuss where that funding will come from, and then again put together agreements and the like for that. One thing I just want to add is that when we know, and that was one of the slides that was discussed, was that we need to do a better job in social media as to identifying these events and their locations. Once in the times that we have been able to do that, that's when we have an operational plan, and that's where a majority of those overtime funds are used to target those specific locations and those dates and times. However, as we know, these things pop off just in an instant. Through social media, where they just text each other, and then next thing you know, there's 200 cars or up to 300 here in San Jose. So when those things occur, we do have, and like Lieutenant Prescott mentioned, during those times we have an overlap between swings and mids. So we're able to hold over some officers to deal with those situations when they occur at the last minute, so to speak. But similar to 2 weeks ago, we had 2 homicides, and then we had 200 or 300 cars here in San Jose as well. So when those things happen, we're taxed with our resources.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Chief, I imagine that you're obviously part of the group of chiefs here in Santa Clara County, and so do you believe there to be an appetite for forming a task force around sideshows? Assuming we had the money.
Yeah, you know what, during the 2 years, like I said, they spoke with it prior to my becoming chief. I know that there was some discussions. They haven't discussed it since. They know we know that we all help each other out, and that's been working. Where we call Milpitas or other agencies, the SO, they'll come and help when we ask for help, or when they ask us for help. If we have any officers or resources, we help out as well. I think it's working, but I guess the goal is to get them out of our cities and county, and then to go to the other cities and counties in the Bay Area.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I guess because there isn't, I mean, it seems like there's an informal sort of mutual aid type of situation in which we all help, which I think is a good thing, obviously. So I'd like to, I'd like to think that, assuming in the future, if you think there's value in moving forward with a more formal task force, I think it'd be a worthwhile conversation to have. And I think we all, and I look to you as the head of the police department to determine whether you think that's reasonable or not. And if you do think it's reasonable, then that's when we start poking Lee and other folks, Sarah, Sarate, and other, I think I saw Zane on the meeting, but folks to maybe go explore, see if there's state monies to go get and help fund a task force. So that's an interest of mine, assuming you think there's some value there. And so I guess, I assume what we're doing is it's working to a certain extent. So if you ever think that's necessary, I'd love to hear from you in a proactive way as to whether you think that's a step we need to take. So I'll just say that those are all the questions I have. I don't know if you want to respond, but or Lee, I saw you sort of approaching the microphone, or if you will. But anyway, those are my thoughts. I don't know if any other council colleagues have any other questions. I don't see any other raised hands. I think, Lee, did you want to say something? I see your little box light up. I don't know.
No, not at all.
Okay, all right. We'll go ahead and go to the public, assuming there's some public comments.
Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. We tried things a little different today, and you had questions after two of the police items that you went through. It's an interesting way to work. It took a long time to go through that before you got to public comment. I don't know if it's the best way in the future, but I'm willing to be open. Hopefully my public comment now can offer something a bit refreshing, and you can have a bit more dialogue after this portion of public comment. My thoughts, a few thoughts that I had on I guess mostly the first section is, good luck how we can talk about, with the domestic violence issues, the future of a police peer review program that I know you guys are working on and have created within the new domestic violence questions. But, to live the true potential of the peer review program, what it's capable of for police, good luck how you can do that, and always be looking into that and how to broaden and open and expand its scope. There's going to be a lot of community meetings this summer, with the Reimagine Task Force going back to their own, work groups and persons. I think it's a subject worth talking about, and good luck how we can talk about the issue. It was also mentioned about there's weird data collection discrepancies going on. It's nice that you caught that as a police department, and your practices are coming to you and data from like pre-COVID and early COVID. Hopefully it's a sign that these are ways people are trying to get out of the era of COVID to go back to these previous statistics. And also a reminder that since November, we've been doing a lot of more ALPR stuff, and that's doing a lot more data collecting. I'm always questioning that concept. I don't think that's what I fear about ALPRs. They're going to collect so much super data on us that we're going to be, way over the top with data. Good luck to address these issues. Check into ALPR stuff and learn how to modify that. Thank you.
Back to the council.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman, and I appreciate you pointing out that we did things a little differently today. As you know, it's typically Councilmember Peralez that chairs the meeting, so I apologize if it was a little disjointed or a little different today. But with that being said, I think we'll move forward and entertain a motion to accept this report on the police department operations and performance bi-monthly status report.
Motion approved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's have a roll call vote.
Arenas,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Mahan,
Aye.
Jimenez.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is item number 2, the gun harm reduction ordinance update. We have a PowerPoint presentation. We have Peter Hamilton, Sarah Zarate, and Steve, Lieutenant Donahue, who's going to continue to join us. So take it away, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Sarah Zarate. I'm the Director of the Office of Administration, Policy, and Intergovernmental Relations. I'm joined by Peter Hamilton, Assistant to the City Manager, and also my co-lead guiding the implementation of this ordinance. We're here to provide you with an update on ordinance implementation, which continues to have uncertainty due to 3 lawsuits filed in U.S. District Court. Attached to the memo are key work plan activities, and the memo analysis also included responses to Councilmember Peralez's questions related to implementation. And now I'll turn it over to Peter to provide a brief presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. So we'll start out with a very brief recap of the ordinance requirements. There are 2 requirements that are established in the ordinance for residents in San Jose who own guns. The first is an insurance requirement. So gun owners in San Jose must maintain homeowners, renters, or gun liability insurance policy that covers losses or damages resulting from any accidental use of their firearm, including death, injury, or property damage. Residents in San Jose would comply with this requirement by through self-attestation. So the city would provide a self-attestation form that gun owners would fill out and list their policy number and their insurance provider, and then keep that form along with their guns. And if they did that, they would be in compliance with the ordinance. If a police officer discovers someone in possession of a gun who does not have that form, then the police department would issue an administrative citation, which comes along with a fine that the violator would have to pay. So the second requirement is gun owners in San Jose must pay a gun harm reduction fee, and they would pay it to a nonprofit organization designated by the city. The fee is set in the fees and charges report for 2022-2023 at the amount of $25, and that's consistent with council direction. The nonprofit who receives the fee would be able to spend it to provide services to gun harm reduction services to gun owners, members of their household, or individuals with whom they have a close familial or intimate relationship. So now we'll move on to our work plan to implement these 2 ordinance requirements. This is a contextual slide that shows us when the ordinance will come into effect. So the council passed the ordinance on the January 25th. There's a second reading on February 8th. And the ordinance is set to come into effect 180 days after that second reading, which is August 8th. However, the ordinance provides that the city manager can set the date at which the insurance requirement and the fee requirement would come into effect through promulgating regulations. So the city manager can issue regulations that set this after August 8th, set the date on which those 2 requirements come into effect. And as Sarah mentioned, where the city is being sued over this ordinance, and that litigation has caused some uncertainty as to the implementation timeline. So our plan, and we specifically that uncertainty may not be resolved by August 8th. The attorney's office, in consultation with the attorney's office, we think there may be some more clarity as to the legal situation in late summer or early fall. So our plan is by the end of June to issue city managers regulations that suspend implementation of the ordinance after August 8th, and then give ourselves the opportunity in August or September to reevaluate the legal situation and decide what a reasonable implementation date might be. And so in the next slide, this slide shows us what that might look like based on the legal situation. So this is our work plan timeline for the insurance requirement specifically. We've been working with the police department and the finance department over the last few months to prepare implementation of the insurance requirement, and we'll continue working with them. We would anticipate being fully ready to implement by August. And in that late August, early September timeframe, we would assess the litigation situation. If it seemed like the coast is clear and we're ready to begin implementation, we would issue a revised version of the city manager recommendations that would set a firm implementation date for the insurance requirement. And the fastest, the quickest timeline we would expect if everything goes well in August and September would be January 1st, which is what's shown here in the tentative box. So leading up to that January 1st implementation date, we would conduct a public outreach campaign. Probably the most significant factor in successful implementation will be just that gun owners know about this requirement. So the public relations campaign would be pretty important. So we would conduct that through the fall, and then by January 1st, the requirement to have that self-attestation form with your guns would come into effect. And then the next slide is the same kind of work plan, but this time for the fee. This one is a little bit different in that we have direction from the City Council not to implement the fee at all until the litigation is complete. So we're not getting in, it's hard to speculate as to when that might be. So we don't know when the implementation date would be for this one, but it will be suspended through our the requirement to pay it would be suspended until that becomes more clear. But we are still planning to move forward to prepare for implementation. As I mentioned, the fee would need to be paid to a designated nonprofit. Staff is recommending that we select this nonprofit through a procurement process. So leading up to August, we would prepare for that procurement, again, assess the litigation situation, make a determination as to whether it made sense to move ahead at that time, and then conduct the procurement process beginning in September, starting with an RFI. And our goal would be to have a nonprofit under contract by the end of the year. And I will also note that at the same time that the council approved this ordinance in January, the council also directed us to bring forward a study session on gun violence prevention. And we anticipate going to rules next week to set that study session for August 15th. And we would use that study session as an opportunity to give the council an update, a brief update on our progress based on this work plan, and inform the council if there's any more clarity as to what the implementation timeline would be and whether any of how will we be proceeding with our implementation activities. And with that, that concludes the presentation, and we're here for questions.
Thank you. I think to honor Mr. Beekman's comment, let's go to public comment first, and then we'll come back to the council.
Blair Beekman.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman here. Thanks a lot for this item. I guess, with it's kind of a gun explosion of young kids in the past month or so. Good luck how we can address that as a whole community process. I think we really have to settle down to the idea that, young kids can't feel that by using a gun, a machine gun, and blowing up a place, that's how you create and resolve problems in our future. It's an age-old issue. I think each generation goes through that. We have to learn how to talk each other down from that sort of space and really learn to practice. Communication just can accomplish a lot. And young kids need to learn that. And we need to learn new skills, how to teach that. Good luck in those efforts. I think, after the shooting at BTA last year, San Jose and the BTA, they did tremendous efforts to really go about and creating a really important way to address the future of gun issues. And they're addressing it in terms of mental health. And, domestic violence, how to address those sort of issues. I think they took a great approach. They've been working on it, for the past year, so nothing should be too surprising in what they came up with. And I hope, all the energy that's going to suing and going to court right now over it, I hope that energy can be better spent just making sure there's good bureaucratic practices for the future of this gun fee program that I think can involve the whole community, more of the communities in getting involved and asking how can we be a part of this process in the future of gun legislation for a city. And that's interesting. And I think that under city government leadership, good things can develop in doing that. So good luck in just a public process towards the future of less gun harm in California, in this city. I think those sort of ideas go way beyond what Texas is doing easily. And we should be proud of what we're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Giovanni.
Hi, I'm Giovanni. Thank you for your time. I'm a Black and Brown representative of East San Jose, and it offends people in my community that are law-abiding citizens that strive for equality and to be able to live the American dream just as equally as the rest of the states. When we get treated like guinea pigs by infringing new laws to practice on us, it is unconstitutional and simply unfair to my law-abiding pro-Second Amendment Black and Brown people. On a positive note, I think we need more police officers in our streets to keep our families safe, and hopefully they can engage with the youth and the community and in a positive fashion, as I've seen in my neighborhood right in front of my eyes. And I think promoting, mental health, education, just like, to take care of mental health people is a good idea as well. And can I just add to also, we have to keep holding the DA accountable for making sure these criminals, including petty theft offenders, are charged accordingly so they can think twice about repeating these crimes. I just think it all goes hand in hand, but that's all I have. And just thank you guys for the time. Appreciate it.
Back to the committee.
Okay, let's go to Vice Mayor Jones, who has some comments or questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And actually, I don't have any questions because I thought the presentation was very well done. And I'm on the record on how I feel about these gun harm reduction efforts. I feel like, we should go further and be more aggressive, but I understand the limitations that we have. And just one quick question, and that is on the insurance requirement. If they're not able to provide their paperwork at the time when the officer requests it, is it similar to like vehicle registration, where if you don't have it available, you get a citation or a warning, and you have to produce the documentation?
Do you want me to take that, Sarah, or do you want to?
You unmuted first, so I thought you were.
Go ahead, Lieutenant Donahue. Go ahead.
I'm quick on the draw on this one. So what'll happen is actually they're not going to get a citation at that point. What we're going to do is we're going to write a report about it. That report will be an administrative citation request. It'll go to our permits unit, and our permits unit is actually going to follow up with them because maybe they didn't have it on them, maybe it wasn't with the gun, or maybe they weren't aware they had to have it with the gun, that kind of thing. We'll do a little bit of outreach if that's the case, and if they just said, you know what, I'm not going to get insurance, okay, then we'll issue the administrative citation. But we'll give them a little bit of leeway here, and there's some education that'll happen on the back end, that so people aren't going to walk away with a ticket right away.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant Donahue. And just on a final note, I heard from, gun owners and members of our community that, this is not going to make a big difference, or it's not going to have an impact. And my response to them was, if we can save one life, then it will have an impact. And so, again, thank you for your efforts in moving this forward, and looking forward to the implementation. And I want to make a motion to accept staff's report.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any other comments? I don't see any other hands raised. I think you stated that very well, Vice Mayor Jones. I appreciate that, and I wholeheartedly agree with your sentiment. So With that, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Arenas,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Mahan,
Aye.
Jimenez.
Aye.
Thank you.
I also want to say, Vice Chair, thank you for that compliment. I'm going to write that down in my journal for today.
Yeah, feel free. I'm the wind beneath your wings, Vice Mayor Jones. Anything you
You are. You
Thank
really are.
All right. Before this devolves into something else, let's let's wrap it up. I think we're at the end of our meeting, so open forum, please.
Blair Beekman.
Hi, thank you. I also felt Vice Mayor Jones offered some interesting words. Thank you. I very much tried to play the middle ground, believe it or not. I think simply the more guns you have, the more the chance there's going to be harm. And we're going to have to deal with harm issues with more guns. And in California, we're really trying to address that. And other states are not. And that's why I feel we're fairly far ahead of things. So good luck in your work and efforts. And that we can all be a part of this process. And that's what's interesting. With that said, I wanted to, I think we're at a time that I think we're feeling pretty dismal about ourselves as a community and as a society overall. And I tried to bring up a list yesterday, and I've been trying to bring it up, learning how to say it. There's 4 or 5 items that, there's tenants' rights issues, worker rights issues, Medicare for all issues, the ideas of openness and accountability with community technology practices that I do. And, the future of Reimagine and addressing law enforcement and our military prison industrial complex. All of those items are ways that I think all parts of the community can take part in and really ask questions about and work towards policy changes within our community, the Bay Area community. A lot is possible at this time. And the projects and practices that are addressing government itself and how government practices. So I think these are ways that people who are feeling so alienated by government and the process at this time, if they want to get behind some good progressive leadership on these ideas, they can have a really important voice towards the change they're looking for and that we're all looking for. And that's how you would create community and sustenance between each other. I think that's our future of positives and good practices. Good luck how we can be doing towards these good things. There is a hope.
Giovanni.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak again. I just wanted to thank everyone here for contributing to making our communities a better and safer place. And thank you, Councilmember Sylvia Arenas, for serving my district. I personally think you're doing an amazing job. And that's all I have. I just wanted to thank everybody for your time.
Back to the committee.
Okay, I think that's about it. This is the last meeting until August. So everyone have a wonderful July break and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.